What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over how you can stop losing to the Shockwave Hammer in Fortnite Chapter 4. With last week's hammer nerf, it was pretty apparent in the comment section that a lot of you have been losing to the hammer smash, and that you really didn't mind the dash or mobility effect of the hammer, and it was really the melee aspect of it that was giving you a hard time. So in this video, I'm going to go over how I approach playing against it and how hopefully you can avoid dying to it in the future. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful and informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below one way you would like to see them nerf the hammer further, or if you think it's fine the way it is. I think the three main situations where you will find yourself having a hard time or potentially losing to the hammer in Chapter 4 is going to be someone just dashes onto you and then goes for a melee strike. 2, you push someone else, and then when you push up to them, they just end up smashing you with the hammer. And then the third situation is going to be an endgame when the zone is incredibly small, and then the player just tries to hammer you into storm. For pretty much all of these, one thing to know is that the melee range of the hammer is about 7 to 8 meters or so. I'll have it on screen now. And you can just ping the ground and kind of get a better feel for what 7 or 8 meters is. I want to say it's like 7.5 or 7.7, something like that. It's not like quite exactly 7, but it's like in between 7 and 8 somewhere. So that's good to know. And when someone uses the hammer, they get stuck. When they use the melee attack of it, they get stuck in an animation for a brief period of time afterwards. So if you're able to dodge this strike by ending up behind them or like behind a piece of cover or something, they do really leave themselves exposed. But I find it best just to try to get away from it rather than try to like kind of finesse them and end up punishing them while they're stuck in that animation. If it works out for you and you get that situation, that's awesome. But I don't try to just like end up behind the person unless it's like a last ditch attempt. Also, pretty much always in Fortnite Zero build, but especially when dealing with the hammer, carrying fast heals is really nice because you can heal after being flung across the map. Typically always, if someone melees me with the hammer, I pull out my own hammer while we're in the sky, and then I dash to a piece of cover and heal. So like I see some people, they get hammered and then they dash back to the person and they get hammered again and then they dash back to the person and they get hammered again and die, and they're like, wow, this thing is so overpowered. But that was super avoidable. When someone hammers you, you just want to get to safety because if they're smart, they're going to hammer you and then look for AR tags while you're stuck out in the open. So you want to get to cover and then heal up. Things like chug splashes and shield fish are great for this, but I think chug splashes are the best healing item if you find yourself dealing with the hammer, and that will come into effect for the final situation that we'll talk about. So let's get into the first situation. This is going to be when another player dashes at you and then goes for the hammer smash. I think this is the most easily avoidable and obvious situation to avoid when it comes with the hammer. And I think this is just kind of like a trap that a lot of people fall into because they see the person dashing at them and they're like, oh, this person is vulnerable, I can get a free kill here. But what ends up happening is they maybe hit like an AR shot or two while the person is in the sky if they're lucky, and then the person gets on them and smashes them. And then they're put in a really awkward situation because when you do get hammer smashed, it is very like disorienting and awkward to deal with. And for players that struggle, when they get put into that situation, they're probably going to lose afterwards. And this very much reminds me of the Kamehameha from last chapter. A lot of people thought it was incredibly overpowered, but if you just didn't opt into trying to get that free kill on the person, it was very easy to deal with. And I feel like this is a similar thing. As long as you don't opt into like trying to get that free kill on the person in the sky, when you see them going for this, just pull out your hammer or your shockwave bow and then get to the like safety, just like get out of there. And if you're lucky, they'll land in a smash and then get stuck in the animation. But either way, when someone just uses mobility to get onto you, that isn't something you want to participate in. You don't want a 50-50 people unless you have a significant HP advantage. And odds are if someone's using their hammer to dash onto you, they either have an HP advantage on you or y'all are neutral on health. And either way, that isn't really going to be a consistent like fight that makes sense to take. So I think if you see someone dashing onto you with mobility, just use your own mobility, get to a different spot, reset the fight, and then play from there. So that's going to be the first situation, and I think that's going to be the most easily avoidable situation. But I think we can all agree the hammer smash is pretty cheesy. So if you think you are the better player and you don't want to deal with this, I think that like if you think you're the better player, the most likely way for you to win is just not get into fights where the hammer smash is like the deciding factor of the fight. You know, that's why I was saying just get out of there and reset the fight. The second situation is going to be if you're hammer dashing onto an opponent. So this is like the inverse of what we were talking about. You have somebody chilling somewhere and then you hammer mobility onto them. For starters, like I just talked about, you don't want to push somebody like this unless you've already gotten a lot of early damage on them. And then even then, you don't want to just get up in their face. You want to get to like some piece of cover where you can like make that a close range fight. You know, if they're behind a big rock, you don't want to just like dash onto their side of the rock. You want to go to your own side of the rock and then maybe play right shoulder peaks. And if you already have an HP advantage, odds are they're already going to be healing. But if you just dash straight onto them, a lot of people are just going to pull out their hammer and smash you. And that's going to create a really awkward scenario, even if you did have the early tags, because now they have time to heal. They might have been healing while you were pushing them. Now you just took 75 damage and you're out in the open. It's a weird situation. So I feel like don't get right up in people's face when you hammer dash onto them unless they're so weak. Like if you AR'd somebody for like 210 or something like that, you know, they have like 40 HP left and you think that you can shotgun them from the sky as you're landing on them, then that's one thing. But more often than not, you don't want to just dash onto somebody and create a situation where y'all are barrel stuffing each other. You want to create a situation where you can have a more like controlled close range fight. So don't just dash onto people without a significant HP advantage, and don't dash onto people unless like just right onto them. You want to get to a piece of cover and then play from there. There are times where you might have to dash onto people when you don't have an HP advantage, like maybe they just threw grenades at you, or your house is on fire that you're in, or like zone is forcing you out. Those are obviously like, you know, unique circumstances, and sometimes you have to make suboptimal plays to deal with those like bad situations, you know. But more often than not, you don't want to just push somebody unless you have an HP advantage. And then even then, unless you have a ridiculous HP advantage, it probably isn't in your favor to just barrel stuff them. The final situation is the one I think a lot of people struggle with most, because I made a poll on my YouTube community page, and this is the thing that people talked about most. And I actually have a clip of me losing in this situation, and I'll tell you what I did wrong here. So this situation is going to be that the zone is so small that the final player just hammers you into zone and you end up dying to storm. And this is annoying for sure, but I think the mistake in this situation is letting it get to this point in the first place. Zero build endgame, there's pretty much no reason for zone to get this small and get to the point where it's moving. Builds is obviously different because people can, you know, build and rotate with builds. You can't just force a fight on somebody, but I feel like the only time the zone will get to this point in zero builds is if just you and everybody else has opted into doing nothing, and that's kind of what happened in this situation here that I'll have on screen. I end up having Storm Mark here, so I know exactly where both of these players are, but they're both just kind of doing nothing. So I figured, okay, we'll wait them out, and then that'll like avoid me getting third partied, because I feel like both these players were just waiting for a fight to happen so they could third party it. I think in hindsight, I should have just been spraying the walls, which I eventually started doing, but we should have just been griefing their cover and forcing them to do something rather than doing nothing. And even viewer clips I was sent with this situation of them losing to the hammer, the zone was incredibly small, and I feel like the only time it's going to get to that point is if the game is so stagnant because nobody is doing anything. And then that's the mistake. If you're playing overly passive in-game and you let zone get this small, the result of that game is going to be incredibly random, because you will have situations like this where maybe someone can just hammer you into zone. And I feel like that is the mistake, you know? If you find yourself consistently losing to this type of situation, it's likely because you're not being proactive enough in-game. If that is something you struggle with, I have the Inside the Mind videos on my channel. I have a whole playlist of it on my channel from last chapter and this chapter, and I kind of go over how I play endgame, and you'll notice in those videos the endgame never really gets to the point where the zone is that small because of how many people I'm killing and how proactive I am in the game. If you just opt to do nothing and just wait, you are actively opting into this situation where maybe somebody can just hammer smash you into zone. And this is also why I think chug splashes are incredibly good, because you can potentially heal into storm or heal in storm while you're like running to zone or back into safety. But once you're hammer smashed into zone, recovering from that is very hard. I think one thing you can maybe do is shockwave yourself straight up and then maybe shoot down on them. Hopefully maybe they smash and miss, and then you can take advantage of that animation if you just send yourself straight up while they're actively trying to smash you. Or maybe if you're using the shockwave bow, you can shockwave bow yourself straight up and then shoot one down at them and knock them into zone while you're in the sky. But at the end of the day, I think the best play is just to not let zone get to this point. Like I said, I think this is extremely random. It is risky to maybe force some fights in game, but I feel like that is something more within your control. You know, if you just wait to do nothing and everybody is waiting to do nothing, the result is going to be really random. If you take some risks earlier, sure, they are some risks, but at least if you win those fights, and come out on top of that, you actually have control over the outcome of the game. I just think getting an endgame where zone is incredibly small and zero build and everybody is hammering each other is extremely random, and you want to avoid that even if it involves some risk earlier on in the game. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. How would you nerf the Shockwave Hammer if you had the ability to? I think for starters, nerf the range of the melee attack for sure. The fact that it's 7 meters, I feel like if it was like 4, that would be way more balanced, or even 3. And then I think also making the melee attack of the hammer consume one of the charges would make it way more balanced. Since it only has 3 charges now, people would really have to think about how they're going to use the hammer, and they couldn't just dash around continuously and then melee you while it's on like full cooldown. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you did, remember to give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.